For almost the entirety of human history, one question was never seriously asked. Not, should we have children? Only when. It didn't matter whether the world was collapsing under the weight of empires, famine, plague, or war. Entire civilizations vanished beneath fire and disease. Cities were reduced to ash. Generations lived and died without ever knowing peace. Yet life continued to insist on itself. People buried their dead, rebuilt their homes, and somehow brought new lives into a world that had given them every reason to despair. Reproduction was never merely a biological instinct. It was an act of faith, a silent declaration that tomorrow deserved to exist, even when today offered no evidence of it. Now imagine the first generation beginning to withdraw that faith, not because they cannot have children, not because biology has failed, but because they no longer believe existence itself is a gift worth passing on. This is what makes the moment we are living through so unsettling. Across much of the developed world, birth rates have fallen below the level needed to replace the population. Governments are spending billions trying to persuade young people to have children through tax incentives, housing subsidies, paid parental leave, and direct financial rewards. Behind every campaign lies the same fear. A society that stops reproducing eventually begins to consume itself. Yet the incentives keep failing, because this is no longer just an economic question. It is a philosophical one. For an increasing number of young adults, bringing a child into the world no longer feels like an expression of hope. It feels like assuming responsibility for another consciousness condemned to uncertainty, anxiety, loss, and mortality. The decision is no longer measured by love alone, but by doubt. Is it ethical? Is it fair? Is another human life a blessing, or another burden added to an already exhausted world? Perhaps what we are witnessing is not simply a demographic decline. Perhaps it is the first civilization confronting a far more disturbing possibility: that its youngest generation has stopped believing the future deserves new inhabitants. This video is not about whether having children is right or wrong. It is about how an entire generation arrived at the point where refusing to continue the human story no longer sounds radical, but rational. For billions of years, life followed a single, unquestioned imperative: continue. Every organism that ever survived did so, because countless generations before it obeyed the same command without hesitation. Hunger, pain, predation, disease, extinction. None of it was sufficient to silence the oldest impulse evolution ever produced. Life endured by reproducing itself, not because existence was gentle, but because existence never asked permission to continue. Humans inherited that impulse, yet humans also acquired something evolution never anticipated: the ability to judge existence before creating it. That changes everything. A growing number of young adults are no longer asking whether they can become parents. They are asking whether they should. The sentence appears everywhere, repeated in different languages, by people who have never met each other. I don't want to bring someone into this world. Hidden inside that ordinary sentence is one of the most radical ideas modern civilization has produced. It rejects an assumption that remained almost untouchable for thousands of years: that creating life is inherently good. Most of the people expressing this view have never opened a philosophical text. They do not need to. The conclusion emerges almost instinctively, shaped by experience rather than theory. Endless exposure to ecological collapse, economic instability, political fragmentation, chronic anxiety, and the permanent spectacle of human suffering has transformed what was once a fringe philosophical position into something emotionally intuitive. This is why antinatalist arguments no longer survive only in academic circles or obscure internet forums. Their underlying logic has quietly migrated into mainstream culture. Online communities dedicated to remaining child-free continue to grow. More young adults openly seek permanent sterilization before the age of 30, despite resistance from medical institutions in many countries. Surveys across North America and Europe repeatedly show a steady increase in adults who say they simply do not intend to become parents, not because they cannot, but because they see no moral obligation to continue the chain. This distinction matters. Previous generations often avoided parenthood because circumstances prevented it. An increasing share of young people reject it, despite having the choice. The obstacle is no longer biology. It is conviction. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this transformation is not that fewer children are being born. It is the reason they are not. For the first time on a significant scale, reproduction is no longer being examined as a personal milestone or a biological destiny. It is being placed on trial as an ethical decision. Birth itself has become the defendant. And if consciousness has reached the point where it can overrule the oldest instinct nature ever engineered, then an uncomfortable question follows. What happens to a civilization when the desire to continue existing is no longer stronger than the hesitation to begin? Every civilization survives on a simple illusion that tomorrow will justify today's sacrifice. Remove that belief, and the machinery continues to function for a while. But the will that sustains it quietly evaporates. The youngest generations did not inherit confidence. They inherited interruption, a global financial collapse before many of them reached adolescence, a pandemic that transformed isolation into a defining life experience, wars returning to continents that once believed themselves immune to history, an escalating climate crisis that no longer belongs to scientific projections, but to daily headlines, artificial intelligence casting uncertainty over entire professions before millions have even begun their careers, housing drifting beyond affordability, stability becoming a luxury instead of an expectation. None of these events, taken alone, explains the collapse in birth rates. Together, they construct a worldview. The world's fertility rate has fallen dramatically over the past half-century and now sits close to replacement level globally, while much of Europe, East Asia, and North America has already fallen well below the threshold required to maintain their populations without immigration. South Korea records the lowest fertility rate ever observed in a modern nation. Japan grows older every year. Italy's births have reached historic lows. China, after decades fearing overpopulation, now confronts the opposite nightmare: too few young people to sustain the society it built. Governments answer with subsidies, tax breaks, paid parental leave, housing incentives, even direct cash payments for newborns. Yet the numbers continue to fall, because incentives assume the obstacle is economic. But economics cannot repair a civilization that has lost confidence in what lies ahead. Perhaps the defining emotion of this generation is not fear. Fear still expects survival. What has emerged instead is something colder: the quiet suspicion that the future itself has become an inheritance too fragile, too uncertain, and too diminished to pass deliberately into the hands of someone who never asked to receive it. Every society claims that children are priceless, until too few of them are born. Then, almost overnight, the language changes. Birth ceases to be celebrated solely as a private joy and becomes a matter of national urgency. Politicians begin speaking of demographic sustainability. Economists warn of shrinking labor forces. Central banks discuss aging populations. Headlines stop asking whether people want children and start asking who will pay for the future. Across the world, governments have entered an increasingly desperate competition against demographic decline. South Korea has spent hundreds of billions of dollars on programs encouraging childbirth, from direct cash bonuses to subsidized childcare and fertility treatment. Hungary offers generous tax exemptions and financial support to larger families. Japan continues expanding childcare and parental benefits. China, after decades of restricting births, now urges couples to have more children through incentives and official campaigns. Russia has revived pro-natalist policies, financial rewards, and public messaging centered on motherhood. Yet beneath every policy lies a truth that is rarely spoken aloud. The child is not only a child. The child is also a future worker, a future consumer, a future taxpayer, a future contributor to pension systems designed under the assumption that every generation would outnumber the one before it. Strip away the sentiment, and the arithmetic becomes impossible to ignore. Modern economies were built on perpetual demographic expansion. When births decline for long enough, the entire structure begins to tremble. Fewer workers support more retirees, consumption slows, tax revenues shrink, economic growth weakens. Institutions that once appeared permanent suddenly reveal how dependent they always were on an endless supply of new lives. Perhaps this is the most unsettling contradiction of all. The individual is told that reproduction is a deeply personal choice. The state quietly depends on that choice for its own survival. And the moment births become scarce, human existence acquires a market value. Not because a newborn has done anything, but because someone has already calculated what that life will eventually produce before it has even learned to speak. For thousands of years, humanity was sustained by an unwritten covenant. Each generation accepted hardship under the assumption that suffering could be redeemed through those who came after. Parents endured deprivation believing their children would inherit something better. Even when history offered little evidence, hope remained the silent currency that made sacrifice bearable. That covenant now appears to be dissolving. Many young adults did not grow up watching fulfilled lives unfold before them. They watched exhaustion become ordinary. Parents consumed by work they despised. Burnout treated as professionalism. Anxiety transformed into a permanent psychological climate. Depression normalized. Divorce commonplace. Loneliness spreading despite unprecedented digital connection. Entire lives organized around employment, only to discover that decades of labor often purchased little more than survival. The promise was never explicitly broken. It simply stopped convincing anyone. For previous generations, having children was often understood as an affirmation of life, despite its suffering. Now suffering itself has become the starting point of the calculation. The question is no longer whether parenthood will be difficult. Difficulty was always part of the bargain. The question has become infinitely more unsettling. What moral authority does anyone possess to initiate another conscious existence into a condition that guarantees loss, grief, uncertainty, aging, and death? This is where the discussion quietly leaves economics behind. It enters ethics. To create a life is no longer perceived by some as an unquestionable good, but as a decision requiring moral justification. Love alone no longer resolves the dilemma. Good intentions do not erase vulnerability. Every birth becomes, whether acknowledged or not, a choice made on behalf of someone incapable of consenting to existence itself. Perhaps that is the deepest fracture of all. A civilization does not begin to disappear only when people stop having children. It begins to disappear when hope loses its authority over reason, and the continuation of humanity no longer feels like a promise, but like a responsibility too immense to impose upon another consciousness. History has rarely advanced because humanity was certain of the future. It advanced because people believed uncertainty was still worth inheriting. Every cathedral, every scientific breakthrough, every nation, every family was built upon an assumption that could never be proven, that tomorrow deserved new witnesses. For centuries, that assumption survived famine, conquest, epidemics, and world wars. Today, it confronts something far less visible: disbelief. The demographic figures are no longer projections confined to academic papers. Across much of Europe and East Asia, fertility rates remain well below the replacement threshold. Countries such as Japan, South Korea, Italy, and China are expected to lose millions of inhabitants over the coming decades unless migration or birth patterns change dramatically. Entire societies are preparing for shrinking populations, aging workforces, and schools that may never again be filled as they once were. But statistics describe consequences. They do not reveal causes. Perhaps the true crisis is not demographic at all. Perhaps it is existential. The most unsettling question is not why fewer children are being born. It is why an increasing number of thoughtful, educated, and emotionally aware people have reached the conclusion that refraining from creating life feels more responsible than creating it. That conclusion cannot be explained by economics alone, nor by politics, nor by climate. It emerges from something deeper, a fading confidence that existence itself remains an unquestionable good. When a civilization begins to regard birth not as hope, but as risk, not as continuity, but as liability, it has crossed an invisible threshold. At that point, population decline is no longer the disease. It is merely the symptom of a culture that has grown uncertain of its own moral legitimacy. Civilizations do not disappear only when they are conquered. Sometimes they vanish when they quietly lose the conviction that they deserve a future. If this video gave you something to think about, then it has already accomplished its purpose. If you'd like to help this channel continue exploring difficult questions like this, consider becoming a channel member or leaving a super thanks. Your support helps keep these videos independent and allows me to keep creating the kind of content that algorithms rarely reward. As a member, you'll also unlock exclusive perks while helping build a community of people who enjoy asking the uncomfortable questions most avoid. That said, you've already helped more than you might realize. Simply watching until the end, sharing this video, or recommending the channel to someone else makes a real difference. And if you're new here, you'll find more than 100 videos exploring philosophy, psychology, history, and the darkest questions about human existence. Thank you for being here.